In 1993, after the siege at Waco, fear of the government simmered like a slow-boiling kettle across America's fringes. It was an era steeped in paranoia, of black helicopters, secret UN takeovers, and the looming apocalypse. In the dusty corners of gas stations, men in camouflage traded VHS tapes about Ruby Ridge and muttered about ATF agents under their breath. It was in this climate of distrust and prophecy that a man named Elijah Bishop first wandered into Flathead County, Montana. He arrived with nothing but a weathered Bible, a sheepskin coat that looked older than he was, and eyes that didn't quite blink right. Some say he came in through Kalispell on a Greyhound bus. Others say he just walked in out of the woods one cold afternoon, quoting Ezekiel and staring at the sky like it was whispering to him. Elijah had once been a seminary student. Raised in Tennessee by a devout Pentecostal mother and a father who made moonshine in the hills, he'd grown up steeped in both scripture and survival. He was a quiet boy, obsessed with the book of Revelation by the age of 12. Not just the fire and brimstone part, but the coded messages, the visions of beasts and plagues, the seals and the trumpets. By 19, he'd enrolled at a small religious college in Kentucky. But something went wrong. Reports from that time are fuzzy. Some say he had a breakdown. Others say he was expelled after accusing a professor of being a demon in human skin. Whatever the truth, Elijah dropped out, disappeared for several years, and re-emerged, bearded, ragged, but brimming with conviction. Now, he was calling himself Father Enoch. And he said God had spoken to him in the desert. Told him he was chosen. Told him to prepare a remnant. Told him fire was coming. Montana's Flathead Valley is beautiful but brutal. The winters are long and punishing. The mountains, jagged, wild, ancient, seem to press in on the land. There's something eerie about it. Isolated. For people like Elijah, people who wanted to disappear, it was perfect. He set up camp in the Kootenai National Forest, about 30 miles off any main road. The first settlers were just a handful. A Vietnam veteran named Carl Mathers who'd been living in his truck. A single mom named Lorraine who claimed her son had visions. A young couple from Idaho who said they'd left their church because it had been infiltrated by the beast. They pitched tents, built lean-tos, started collecting food, firewood, and firearms. Elijah, or rather, Father Enoch, would preach every morning before sunrise. His sermons were unlike anything they'd heard in Sunday school. He talked of angels with swords, of Babylon rising, of a coming darkness that would sweep through the cities like a virus. He said only those set apart would be spared. To the broken, the paranoid, the disillusioned, he offered something irresistible. Certainty. Purpose. And most intoxicating of all, a role in the final act of history. It didn't take long for word to spread. By spring, more people had arrived. A former schoolteacher from Spokane who'd lost her pension. A man who claimed to be an ex-CIA analyst. Young people in dreadlocks and denim who'd followed hand-drawn maps passed around at gun shows and survivalist forums. They called themselves the Remnant of the Flame. To outsiders, they were just another doomsday cult. But to each other, they were the beginning of a new kingdom. What made the Remnant different wasn't just their isolation. It was their doctrine. Elijah, or Father Enoch, had rewritten Revelation in a way that made it immediate. The beast wasn't some future antichrist. It was the modern world itself. The government. The media. The poisoned food. The compromised churches with their soft doctrine and tax exemptions. And the fire wasn't just metaphorical. It was coming. Real, literal, all-consuming fire. He described it in terrifying detail, visions of cities melting, bodies turning to ash, rivers boiling. Only those who had purified themselves in the wilderness would be saved. To purify, they had to abandon all ties. Families. Possessions. Even names. One by one, new members were given names from Scripture: Obadiah, Miriam, Ezekiel, Ruth. They burned their IDs, their credit cards, their photographs. They buried their past. They built a compound, though no one called it that. It was the sanctuary. From the air, it was nearly invisible. Tucked deep in a forested ravine, camouflage tarps covered cabins and storage sheds. Smoke from fires was carefully filtered through trenches. Patrols were posted at night. Guns were cleaned daily. Locals began to notice strange things. Bonfires flickering through the trees, far past midnight. Chanting, low, guttural, in what one hunter said was some kind of dead language. Occasionally, people would appear in Kalispell or Whitefish to buy bulk rice or ammo, but they rarely spoke. They always paid in cash. Rumors began to swirl. That the cult, because by now, that's what everyone was calling them, had a cryptic initiation. That they practiced self-flagellation. That children weren't allowed to speak. No one had proof. No one had seen the compound up close. And no one, had ever escaped. Until Grace. But it wasn't until a woman named Grace Whitman escaped barefoot from the woods in the dead of winter that the world began to understand what was really happening beyond the tree line. Grace Whitman was 27 when she arrived at the sanctuary. She'd grown up in Southern California. Middle class. Catholic. Her father died when she was 14, and something in her unraveled after that. By college, she dropped out of UCLA, joined a few fringe movements, and was known in certain online spiritual forums for her long rants about the Luciferian Matrix. She'd seen a post about Father Enoch on an old conspiracy board. The phrase, 144,000 chosen, struck something deep in her. She took a bus to Montana and never told her family where she was going. At first, Grace was devout. She embraced the rituals, the fasting, the work. But something shifted. She began to ask questions. Why were certain members given more food than others? Why were women forbidden from reading certain books? Why were they training children to use knives? She was labeled rebellious. And in the sanctuary, that was a dangerous thing to be. According to Grace, they put her in a pit. Literally, a pit dug in the ground, covered by logs and brush, where she was kept for 7 days with nothing but a canteen of water and scraps of jerky. She was told it was for purification. That God was burning the doubt out of her. But Grace did not break. She waited. She listened. And then, one night in January 1994, when a snowstorm masked her escape, she ran. She ran barefoot through the woods for 5 miles. When she was found by a rancher on County Road 83, her feet were frostbitten, her clothes were shredded, and she weighed less than 90 pounds. But what she said, what she told authorities, that changed everything. Grace said the compound was preparing for something called the opening of the 7 seals, a twisted version of Revelation's apocalypse. Each seal, she explained, corresponded to a phase of purification. Seal 1 was severance, cutting ties from the outside world. Seal 2 was submission, blind obedience to Father Enoch. Seal 3 was silence, where speaking was forbidden for weeks. Seal 4 was suffering, fasting, sleep deprivation, isolation. Seal 5 was sacrifice, offering something of great personal value. Seal 6 was sanctification, a final rite involving fire. Seal 7 was never discussed aloud. But Grace said she'd seen things. Children put through physical trials. A man burned with coals for speaking out of turn. And, worst of all, something they called the purge. She didn't know what it was. But people had vanished. Grace's testimony was enough to trigger an investigation. But what authorities would discover over the following months would shake them to their core, and make headlines around the world. The FBI would soon uncover a map, drawn by hand, covered in biblical references, stars, and strange symbols. It pointed not just to one compound, but to five. 5 sites. 5 sanctuaries. 5 factions of the remnant, spread across the American wilderness. And every single one of them was preparing for war. Grace Whitman was 27 when she stumbled out of the woods near Hungry Horse, Montana. She had been missing for over 2 years. Her mother thought she was dead. Her file was marked inactive. A footnote. Another troubled girl who had vanished in the Pacific Northwest. But Grace had not disappeared. She had been taken. When the rancher found her, she was wearing what looked like homespun cloth. Her hands were raw and bleeding, her eyes sunken with fear. Her first words were barely a whisper. "They're not who they say they are. The children are theirs now. You have to stop them before the purge." The purge of light, she called it. And no one knew what that meant. Yet. For the first 72 hours, Grace was kept in a Kalispell hospital under psychological observation. Doctors suspected trauma-induced psychosis. But her story never changed. She spoke of being renamed Sister Galilee, of having her head shaved under the stars while Father Enoch recited scripture from memory, of being told she had unclean blood and needed to be emptied. She described how women were considered vessels, containers for divine reincarnation. They were forbidden to speak during certain hours, could only eat food anointed by the fire, and were cleansed weekly through ice baths, fasting, and ritual humiliation. She said she'd once been locked in a cellar for 5 days for crying during a sermon. That she watched a woman give birth on a floor of pine needles, only to have the infant taken by the elders and raised communally. That Father Enoch claimed the child was Saint Stephen reborn. Grace's recollections revealed the cult's terrifying hierarchy. At the top was Father Enoch, the flame-bearer and supposed final prophet before the world's cleansing. Beneath him were the 12 kings, older men, all hand-picked. Former pastors, ex-military, survivalists. They acted as governors, disciplinarians, and teachers. Then came the vessels, all women. Ranked not by seniority, but by purity. Below them, the children of the flame, a generation raised entirely inside the sanctuary, most of whom had no memory of the outside world. New recruits were called ashlings. Ashlings were stripped of their identities on arrival. Their names were burned in a communal fire. They were baptized in the icy waters of Flathead Lake, forced to memorize entire chapters of Revelation, and assigned mentors who reported any doubt or hesitation. Rituals were frequent and brutal. One involved being buried alive, briefly, under snow to symbolize death to the flesh. Another involved silence fasting, where recruits could not speak, write, or make eye contact for 21 days. Grace claimed that several recruits never came back from these trials. But the most disturbing part? The children were never taught fear. They were taught obedience. Even when they watched someone scream. As Grace told her story, investigators quietly reopened old files. And what they found painted a grim pattern. Between 1992 and 1994, a total of 16 individuals had gone missing in the surrounding counties. Many had similar profiles: spiritual seekers, survivalists, the mentally unwell, or people with no close family. Most were dismissed as voluntary disappearances. But some weren't. A gas station attendant recalled a man named Victor, a regular customer, who came in one day with a shaved head and glassy eyes. He bought 20 cans of lye and said it was for spiritual purging. The attendant filed a report. Nothing was done. A local librarian remembered a soft-spoken young woman named Clara who checked out the Apocrypha every 2 weeks. One day, she returned all her books, donated her car to a local church, and said she was going to become flame. She was never seen again. People noticed. But fear kept them silent. Locals had begun calling the area near the forest line Dead Hollow. Hunters avoided it. Ranchers refused to ride near it at night. Strange howls. Drums echoing through the trees. And those lights, the fires that burned blue in the distance. By early 1995, Grace's account had sparked concern in Washington. The FBI began a quiet file. Codename, Project Morningstar. At first, they sent in drones. But the sanctuary's canopy was thick, and the drones were grounded more than once by unknown signal interference. So, they went old school. A 38-year-old agent named Daniel Resnick, a specialist in infiltration and former seminarian, volunteered to go undercover. He studied the scriptures obsessively. Memorized sermons. Shaved his head. Adopted the identity of Brother Amos, a former fire lookout turned spiritual wanderer. On February 3, 1995, he was dropped at a trailhead near the forest's edge, carrying nothing but a duffel bag and a story. He was never seen again. Not a single radio signal. No tracker ping. Just gone. 3 months later, the government couldn't keep it quiet any longer. The loss of a federal agent escalated the situation dramatically. A multi-agency task force was assembled, FBI, ATF, and a small group from the Bureau of Indian Affairs familiar with the terrain. Their goal, locate the sanctuary, assess the threat, and extract any hostages, especially children. But there was a problem. No one knew exactly where the compound was. The forest was vast. The terrain was unforgiving. And the cult had taken extreme measures to remain invisible, camouflaging paths, using underground bunkers, and employing scouts at every access point. Locals, even if they had known something, weren't talking. Fear gripped the valley like ice. What they did have was Grace. While recovering in a secure location, Grace began to draw. She sketched a map, not with roads or trails, but with stars. She said the sanctuary's buildings were arranged in the shape of a celestial seal, designed to open the heavens when the time came. She recalled waking at night to chants about alignments and blood moons, and how the compound had a throne room with obsidian floors, where Father Enoch spoke of the purge of light. According to Grace, the purge was the final phase. It would begin with a sacrifice, followed by the mass release of pure children into the world, to carry the fire into Babylon. She said they had been stockpiling weapons. Chemicals. That she had seen diagrams of blueprints for devices she didn't understand. That's when the word domestic terror threat first appeared in the file. But before any raid could be planned, the task force needed eyes inside. This time, they sent two. A wilderness survival expert named Lena Morell, and a National Guard linguist named Jason Petrov, both outfitted with covert tracking tech. Their mission, approach as seekers, gain trust, locate Agent Resnick or any evidence of the purge, and transmit coordinates. They entered in late summer, posing as a brother-sister pair looking for spiritual shelter. For 6 days, no contact. On day 7, a signal pinged briefly, a heartbeat from the GPS beacon. Then silence. A week later, a package arrived at a ranger station near Kalispell. Inside, a burned ID tag. A lock of hair. A page from the Book of Revelation, heavily marked in red ink. And a cassette tape. The tape was grainy. garbled. But what it contained has never been released in full. Only fragments have been verified. The fire cleanses, not because it destroys, but because it reveals. They were never your children. They were chosen before birth. You only borrowed them. If Babylon strikes us, the trumpets will sound, and we will be taken into the light. The voice was unmistakable. Father Enoch. And he sounded, calm. Almost proud. The final line of the tape? To the watchers, we welcome your wrath. It is the final confirmation of our truth. Plans were drawn up for a raid. Chinooks were fueled. Snipers were posted. A perimeter was quietly formed over 14 miles of forest. But the night before the strike, every single scout in the surrounding area reported the same thing. The fires were out. The lights were gone. The compound was empty. When the task force entered at dawn, they found remnants. Burned structures. Empty bunkers. An altar of black stone, still warm to the touch. And in the throne room? A single line carved into the obsidian floor. The fire has moved east. In the weeks that followed, media frenzy exploded. Documentaries aired. Book deals were signed. Grace Whitman disappeared into protective custody. The FBI labeled Father Enoch an at-large domestic extremist. But they never found him. Or the kings. Or the children. What they did find, scattered across Idaho, Utah, and Colorado, were 5 new compounds. Each aligned to a different star. Each built with the same symbols. Each silent, for now. What happened to the children? Where is Father Enoch now? And what is the purge of light really about? Because in the next part of this investigation, we uncover a hidden manifesto, a secret network of underground sanctuaries, and the most disturbing theory of all. That the remnant of the flame never intended to survive. They intended to ignite. March 14, 1999, 9:07 p.m., secure FBI channel. The fire is already lit. Hurry. That was the last message received from Special Agent Daniel Myers before he vanished. He had been undercover for 3 months. Embedded within a splinter sect of the remnant, he tracked their movements, sent coordinates, and described new compounds, deeper, more militarized, and more fanatical than ever before. His final message was only 6 words. But it triggered Operation Edenfall, one of the most covert, classified, and emotionally devastating investigations in U.S. domestic counterterrorism history. This is the story of that operation. And what law enforcement found during the final raid will haunt everyone who was there for the rest of their lives. By 1999, the government had been watching the remnant for nearly 6 years. They knew the cult had fractured into multiple off-grid communities, some in Idaho, others in Colorado, Utah, and even parts of Nevada. They called them the Outer Sanctuaries. But the group still seemed to answer to one man, Father Enoch. His sermons, distributed via cassette, shortwave, and hand-copied zines, were filled with increasingly militant rhetoric. When the 7th seal opens, the sword will fall upon Babylon. We are not waiting for war. We are the war. But without a criminal act, there was nothing law enforcement could do. Preaching hatred isn't illegal. Training in the woods isn't illegal. Not until blood is spilled. That changed in the spring of 1999. April 8, 1999. Glacier National Park. A solo hiker named Mark Teller reported a smell like burned meat coming from a patch of trees. At first, he thought it was a dead elk. But what he found was worse. A makeshift pyre. Charred bones. Something like a ceremonial altar made of stones. At first, the remains couldn't be identified. Too badly burned. But there were signs. Deliberate carvings on the ribs. Teeth missing, removed, not lost. And at the scene, buried beneath moss, they found a small metal pendant, a heart with an opal center. DNA testing confirmed it belonged to a girl named Hannah Pierce, reported missing from Portland, Oregon, 3 years earlier. She had last been seen getting into a van with out-of-state plates after a Christian youth group meeting. The case had gone cold. Now it was open again. And it was worse than anyone feared. The FBI launched a full forensic investigation into the site. What they found suggested not just murder, but ritual sacrifice. This wasn't just ideology anymore. This was action. By this time, the cult had evolved. The remnant of the Flame was no longer just a fringe group. It had become a network, tight-lipped, mobile, using coded language and decentralized cells. Each sanctuary was self-sufficient, loyal, and secretive. Grace Whitman had warned that the children were being prepared. Now it seemed that preparation had begun. Surveillance revealed new bunkers dug deep into the sides of hills. Smoke patterns consistent with underground furnace systems. An increase in young recruits, many under 18, reported missing from California, Washington, and Colorado. All signs pointed to the cult preparing for something big. And then, a ghost signal. Agent Daniel Myers was a seasoned undercover operative. Deep cover in militia circles. Multiple commendations. Level-headed. Patient. He was chosen to infiltrate what intelligence analysts believed was the new Inner Circle, a group calling themselves the Ember Prophets. This cell was believed to be closest to Father Enoch himself. Daniel posed as a disillusioned ex-Marine named Jonas. He showed up near Moab, Utah, where rumors of a hidden sanctuary had emerged. 4 weeks, no contact. Then, 2 messages. First, they speak of the flame like it's alive. They believe it will choose who burns. The kids are being trained. It's worse than Waco. Second, the fire is already lit. Hurry. That was the last anyone heard from him. The message was enough. With forensic evidence from Hannah Pierce's remains, and confirmation of a potential second victim found near Ely, Nevada, a federal judge approved the use of force. Operation Edenfall was greenlit. Over 80 agents mobilized. Military support was authorized, though kept off-book. Thermal drones confirmed movement in a remote canyon near the Utah-Arizona border. Over a dozen heat signatures. Children included. The raid was set for May 4, 1999. They expected resistance. What they found was worse. At 3:12 a.m., agents moved in. The entrance to the compound was hidden behind a false rock face. Once breached, they descended into a series of hand-dug tunnels, reinforced with timber and plastic sheeting. The smell was immediate: ash, decay, chemical residue. The first chamber was empty: bunk beds, blankets, signs of recent use. The second was a prayer hall. An altar. Charcoal drawings of angels with flaming swords. A fire pit filled with scorched bones. Animal and human. The third chamber, labeled Zion, was sealed with a steel door, welded shut from the inside. They used thermite to cut through. What lay inside left even the most hardened agents reeling. It was a classroom. Of sorts. 15 small beds. Toys. Scriptures written in crayon. But also metal collars. Chains bolted to the walls. A whiteboard listing purification levels next to each child's name. And one word written in blood-red ink across the far wall. Revelation 14 verse 4. These are they which were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. The children were gone. But someone had left behind a tape recorder. On it, the voice of a child reciting scripture. Monotone. Mechanical. Then, Father Enoch's voice. They are the Lamb's army. And Babylon will weep when it sees who carries the sword. Then laughter. Then silence. In the deepest part of the compound, they found what came to be known as the Chapel of Flame. It was circular, carved into the rock. At the center, a stone throne, charred black. Behind it, etched into the wall in a crude, seared pattern. The purge of light has begun. There were no bodies. No children. No Father Enoch. Only ashes. DNA analysis later confirmed at least 4 separate individuals had been immolated there. But none matched Daniel Myers. He was never found. Operation Edenfall was declared a success, publicly. Privately, it was a catastrophe. Over a dozen children, confirmed missing, were never recovered. 5 compounds were found emptied, cleared out days or hours before raids took place. Dozens of followers disappeared. Caches of weapons and chemical precursors were discovered. Father Enoch's image was added to the FBI's most wanted list. But no trace of him has been seen since. Grace Whitman, the original whistleblower, was placed into permanent witness protection. She has not spoken publicly since 1996. But in 2012, someone anonymously posted a series of photos on a deep web forum. Among them, a grainy shot of a group of teenagers in robes, holding candles, standing in front of a flaming symbol. The symbol matched the one carved in the Chapel of Flame. The caption? We were born of fire. And we are many. The remnant of the flame didn't die in Utah. It spread. Across small towns. Online forums. Backroad churches. A new generation has taken up the fire. They don't wear robes anymore. They wear hoodies. Carry smartphones. And believe they will finish what Father Enoch started. In the next episode, we go inside the new digital sanctuaries. The recruitment. The radicalization. The children raised to burn the world to save it. Because the fire isn't just lit. It's spreading. February 6, 2001, 3:14 a.m. Outside a remote woodland in Idaho's Sawtooth Mountains, federal agents moved through waist-deep snow. The target, a hidden compound known only as Eden. Satellite footage had shown smoke trails. Thermal scans revealed movement. The final remnant, they believed. The last flicker of the fire. They were prepared for resistance. Weapons. Traps. Gunfire. But what they found was something else entirely. The Eden compound was eerily quiet. Over a dozen wooden structures, buried beneath snow, windows broken, doors swinging in the wind. Inside, agents found only 7 people. Emaciated. Chained to walls. Some naked. All malnourished. They didn't speak. They couldn't. One man kept murmuring the same phrase. We were too slow. We were too slow. The fire left us behind. One woman had carved a burning eye symbol into her own chest. Another had gouged out her tongue. Medical teams rushed them to safety. All were later deemed psychologically unfit for formal interviews. Inside the main lodge, the agents found a journal, bound in leather, scorched at the edges. Its final page was signed by Elijah Bishop himself. The chosen have ascended. The fire cleanses. The rest are for the worms. But that wasn't all. Beneath the commune, agents discovered a tunnel, narrow, cold, lined with soot and stone. At the end was a crude metal door, sealed with rusted chain. Behind it, a chapel, built from bones. The walls were lined with femurs, ribs, and spines. The altar, a skull-encrusted pillar, stood beneath a massive sun symbol scorched into the rock. It was silent, still, and filled with names. Hundreds of them, etched into the walls, burned into beams, scratched into bone. Children, dozens of them. Some were traced back to known missing persons from across the country. Others were total unknowns. But one thing was clear, this was a ledger, a catalogue, and possibly a memorial. One name, however, stood out. Imri. No last name. No age. Just a single, chilling phrase beside it. The flame that does not die. Following boot tracks leading away from Eden, a recon team discovered a nearby mountain cabin, hidden in the snow-covered pines. It was silent. Windows blackened with soot. Inside, they found the charred remains of over 24 people. They were seated in a circle, holding hands, heads bowed. At the center, a collapsed stone altar and a pile of ash that had once been parchment and photographs. Among the dead, former cult elders, high-ranking followers, and one body positively identified through dental records as Elijah Bishop, aka Father Enoch. His arms were outstretched, as if welcoming the flames. Forensics confirmed it, mass self-immolation. A final act of devotion. The purge of light had come to its terrible crescendo. Case closed. Or so they thought. The FBI closed the Eden file. Declared the cult dismantled. The press moved on. The ashes cooled. But deep inside that chapel of bones, a handful of names remained unmatched. Including Imri. No child by that name had been reported missing. No record of a birth. No leads. Until 14 years later. August 2, 2015, Denver, Colorado. A 19-year-old woman was arrested for shoplifting. No ID. No record in any database. Malnourished. Pale. Covered in faded scars. When questioned, she gave only one name. Imri. At first, authorities thought it was a fake name, until an FBI analyst recognized it from the Eden file. She was taken into custody. Transferred to Quantico. What she told agents unraveled everything they thought they knew about the remnant of the flame. According to her statement, Imri was born in 1996, inside one of the cult's mobile sanctuaries. She never knew her mother. Children were raised communally, taught that Father Enoch was both prophet and parent. She was told she was chosen. Marked from birth. Destined to be a light-bearer. Her memories were fragmented. She described caves, fire rituals, sermons under the stars, sleep deprivation, and injections she couldn't explain. By age 6, she had memorized the entire book of Revelation. By age 8, she was being trained to lead others. She was never taught. When asked how she survived the final immolation at Eden, her answer was chilling. He told me to run. He said I was the last ember. And when the world forgets, I will remember. Because the fire is patient. In the years following Imri's appearance, investigators began to re-examine dormant leads. They found new forums. Darknet chats. Private online groups using familiar language. 144,000 chosen. Sanctuaries of fire. The Lamb will return. These weren't just nostalgic cultists. They were organized. Recruiting. Adapting. The remnant of the flame didn't die at Eden. It metastasized. They traded robes for VPNs, altars for encrypted message boards. And children, like Imri, had become the vessels for something more terrifying. A new doctrine. No longer waiting for the apocalypse. Now, preparing to ignite it themselves. During one interview, Imri handed the agents a cassette tape she said she'd hidden as a child. The audio was faint, but one voice cut through. To the child who hears this, if the world still stands, know this: fire cannot be killed. It sleeps in the bones of the faithful. And when you are ready, daughter of light, take up the flame. It was Elijah Bishop speaking directly to her. There's still no proof how many children survived Eden. Theories suggest at least 4 slipped away before the immolation. Others believe the purge was not the end, but a reset. That Father Enoch orchestrated his own death to escape attention, leaving the embers behind to grow in the shadows. Imri disappeared shortly after her final interview. Her whereabouts are unknown. But 4 months later, in a remote Arizona church, parishioners found a message carved into the altar wood. The flame remembers. And beneath it, a symbol. The burning eye. She survived the fire. She remembers the doctrine. And now, she's not the only one. In the next chapter, we follow a journalist who tracked the cult's digital rebirth, one breadcrumb at a time, into the heart of an underground movement hiding in plain sight. And what she uncovered could mean: the fire isn't just alive. It's awakening. February 2015, Prince George Regional Hospital, British Columbia. A disoriented woman is wheeled into the ER. Thin. Dirt-caked. Eyes wide with fear, but something else, too. Conviction. She refuses medication. She speaks in low, rhythmic tones. One line stands out. The flame has kept me. I am its bride. I am the last vessel. Doctors assume delusion. Until a nurse runs a routine DNA test. The results send shockwaves through the RCMP. And then, through the FBI. The woman is confirmed to be the daughter of Grace Whitman, the same woman who escaped the Eden compound in the winter of 1997, barefoot, bloodied, and bearing stories no one wanted to believe. The child everyone thought had perished, had been raised in the shadows. And now she had returned, with a warning. She gave no name. She would only repeat her title. The Last Vessel. Bride of the Flame. Her story, over several days of questioning, was fragmented. But some pieces were crystal clear. She was taken from Grace moments after birth. She was raised in complete isolation, no peers, no formal education. Her caretakers were masked. Silent. She called them the Watchers. Every day, she was read scripture, not just the Bible, but Enochian texts, Apocrypha, and writings said to come directly from Elijah himself. She claimed Elijah Bishop never died in the fire. That the body found in the Eden pyre was a stand-in, sacrificed to deceive the eyes of the faithless. And that the real Elijah had moved west. To prepare a second fire. She said. The first fire cleansed the weak. The second fire will crown the pure. Most investigators dismissed her as unstable. But others weren't so sure. Because in her possession were 3 items. A handwritten letter, dated 2001, signed Father Enoch, with handwriting matching verified samples from Elijah Bishop. A small bronze medallion inscribed with the phrase, I am Ra, walk in light, identical to one found in the Eden Chapel of Bones. A map. Crude. Hand-drawn. Showing a string of waypoints stretching from Idaho to Nevada to Arizona, all marked with a burning eye. One spot in particular caught agents' attention, New Harmony, Utah. A town with no more than 250 people. But just weeks prior, a missing persons report had surfaced. 3 teens. Last seen at a gas station outside town. No trace since. At the same time, locals reported strange lights on the mesa. Chants at night. And a man, charismatic, gray-bearded, preaching by firelight. Always moving. Never staying more than a few nights. Some called him a prophet. Others, just another drifter. But every description matched one man. Elijah Bishop. Officially, Elijah Bishop died in 2001. Autopsy records were filed. The body was claimed. But here's the truth. The remains were too badly burned for conclusive identification. DNA was degraded. All the FBI ever had was circumstantial evidence, and a convenient narrative. No photos. No video. Just ashes. And in the years since, the sightings kept coming. 2003, a street preacher in Las Cruces quotes the Book of Flame, a text known only to Eden initiates. 2007, a fire ritual in northern Arizona is broken up by rangers. The man escapes. All that remains is a leather-bound sermon titled, The Path Beyond Purge. 2010, a small cult in California is raided. The leader disappears hours before, leaving behind only a recorded message. Tell them I walk with fire. Tell them I will return with it. Each time, the voice is different. The name is different. But the message? Always the same. The FBI reopens the Eden file in 2016. What they find is worse than expected. The cult didn't die. It fractured. Dozens of former members who disappeared during the original investigation had re-emerged under new names, often embedded in survivalist groups, doomsday preppers, online spiritual forums, alternative medicine retreats. In 2017, a compound in Montana is found stockpiling weapons. The leader claims he follows the second path. In 2019, a fire ritual in the Nevada desert ends with 2 dead, their bodies branded with a flaming eye symbol. And in 2020, a YouTube channel under the name Cleansing Watch posts a cryptic sermon. When the world is ready, the vessel will rise. The chosen will follow. And the fire will finally meet the sky. The video is deleted within 24 hours. But by then, it's already gone viral. Facial recognition software suggests the speaker may be a 72-year-old man last seen in Montana in 1999. Name: Elijah Bishop. Before the woman known as the Last Vessel disappears from the hospital, yes, disappears, she leaves behind a final note, written in black marker across the hospital wall. He is not finished. He walks the dust roads. His fire is patient. His bride waits beneath the mountain. Authorities launched a full-scale manhunt. No luck. She was gone. Vanished, just like her mother once had. But her prophecy stayed. Seared into the minds of those who heard it. Especially one line. His fire is patient. Today, the official story remains unchanged. Elijah Bishop died in 2001. The remnant of the flame is defunct. No known active cells remain. But behind the scenes, agencies know better. Because every year, more sightings emerge. A prayer group in southern Utah, all wearing flame pendants. A child found in New Mexico, drawing the burning eye. A cult-themed podcast that ends with a coded message, he still walks. And perhaps most chilling of all? In 2023, a wildfire swept through parts of northern Arizona. At the edge of the burn zone, firefighters found a stone altar. On it, a charred leather-bound book. Inside, a single line. Imri, your fire awaits. What began in Flathead County, Montana, with a drifting ex-seminarian and a few bonfires in the woods, became something no one saw coming. A doctrine. A movement. A virus of belief. Not just about the end of the world, but about who deserves to survive it. Elijah Bishop may be dead. Or he may be preaching on a roadside right now. But one thing is certain. The ashes of Eden have never stopped smoldering. If you're ever driving through the desert, and you see smoke on the horizon, a fire that shouldn't be there, someone preaching by torchlight, you didn't see anything. You didn't hear anything. And whatever you do, don't speak the name. The fire listens.